Morocco has launched a strategy called phosphate diplomacy. They are using their control of the fertilizer market to build alliances and force concessions. Look at what is happening in Africa. OCP Group is not just selling fertilizer. They are building factories in Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Ghana. They are teaching African farmers how to use the product. They are effectively taking control of the African food supply chain. In a continent that is expected to double in population by 2050, whoever controls the food controls the politics. Morocco is buying the loyalty of an entire continent with sacks of fertilizer. And in the West, Morocco is using its leverage to gain recognition for its territorial claims. The Western Sahara region is the subject of a long-running dispute. But look at where the phosphate mines are. Many of the key reserves are in that territory. In recent years, we have seen the United States and other Western powers recognize Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara. Why? Because they did the math. They realized they cannot afford to alienate the landlord of the global food system. It is a transactional reality. You want to eat, you respect the map. But the economic angle is even more terrifying for the average consumer. In 2026, we are seeing the beginning of the great food inflation. We are not talking about a 5% hike in the price of eggs. We are talking about a structural reset in the cost of calories. When the price of fertilizer triples, the farmer has two choices. He can go bankrupt, or he can pass the cost on to you. And since people have to eat, they will pay. Food is what economists call an inelastic good. If the price of a new iPhone goes up, you don't buy it. If the price of bread goes up, you buy it anyway. You cut everything else, you stop going to the movies, you stop driving, you stop buying clothes, but you buy the bread. This means that Morocco effectively has a tax on the entire global economy. Every time OCP raises the price of phosphate rock, they are taking money out of your pocket and putting it into theirs. It is a wealth transfer on a planetary scale. And unlike oil, which we are trying to replace with solar and wind, there is no replacement for phosphorus. There is no green energy transition for food. You cannot build an electric wheat stalk. You need the chemical element P. There have been attempts to recycle it, to pull it out of sewage sludge, to recover it from food waste, but the technology is expensive and it cannot scale fast enough to meet the demand of 8 billion people. For the foreseeable future, we are stuck with the mines. This monopoly creates a single point of failure for human civilization. Imagine a scenario where a war breaks out in North Africa. Imagine a blockade of the Moroccan ports. Imagine a cyber attack on the OCP mining infrastructure. Within weeks, the global fertilizer supply chain would seize up. Within months, farmers in Brazil and the US would be unable to plant. Within a year, we would be facing global famine. This is not science fiction. This is supply chain logic. We have centralized the survival of the species in one geographic location. In 2026, the intelligence agencies of the world are waking up to this nightmare. We are seeing a scramble to find alternative sources. There are deposits in Algeria, but the infrastructure is poor. There are deposits in Saudi Arabia, but they are smaller. There are deposits under the ocean, but mining them is an environmental disaster. The reality is that there is no alternative to Morocco. They are the swing producer, they are the central bank. So what does the future look like? It looks like a world where food is a weapon. In the 1970s, the Arab nations used the oil weapon to bring the West to its knees. In the late 2020s, we could see the deployment of the food weapon. Imagine a world where fertilizer shipments are tied to political compliance. You want your nitrogen and phosphorus? You vote with us at the UN. You want your food security? You sign the trade deal. It creates a hierarchy of nations. The nations that have the fertilizer and the food are the masters. The nations that have to import it are the servants. This is why we are seeing countries like India panic. India has the largest population in the world and almost no domestic phosphate reserves. They are entirely at the mercy of the global market. In 2026, India is scrambling to sign long-term deals with Morocco to lock in supply. They are effectively becoming a client state of the phosphate empire. And for the investor, the signal is clear. The era of tech stocks and digital assets is overshadowing the return of hard resources. But you cannot eat Bitcoin. You cannot eat AI. The most valuable companies of the next decade might not be the ones that build the chatbots. They might be the ones that own the mines and the farms, the companies that control the physical inputs of life. The market is slowly realizing that the intrinsic value of a calorie is much higher than we thought. For 50 years, we treated food as a cheap commodity. Now we are learning that it is a strategic asset. As we move deeper into 2026, watch the price of fertilizer. It is the canary in the coal mine. If it spikes, it means the system is breaking. It means the Saudi Arabia of food is tightening the screws. We are entering a new era of scarcity, an era where geology is destiny. The map of the world is being redrawn not by armies, but by resources. The dominance of the US dollar was built on the petrodollar system. The deal was that oil is sold in dollars. But what happens if the most important commodity is no longer oil? What happens if it is food? Do we see the rise of the Phos dollar, or does Morocco trade in a basket of currencies? Does it trade in yuan? Does it trade in gold? The shifting of power away from the energy producers to the food producers is the untold story of our time. It shifts the geopolitical axis away from the Middle East and towards North Africa, and it puts a spotlight on a kingdom that has quietly played the long game. While the rest of the world was fighting over oil pipelines, Morocco was building the world's largest fertilizer hubs. They were digging deeper. They were planning for a future where population growth collides with resource scarcity. That future has arrived. The next time you sit down to dinner, look at the plate. The corn, the wheat, the soy, the meat. None of it would be there without the white powder from the Moroccan desert. We are all guests at Morocco's table, and in 2026, the host is sending the bill. It is a bill that will reshape economies. It will topple governments that cannot feed their people. It will cause riots in cities where bread becomes a luxury. The food wars are not coming. They are here. They are being fought in the commodities exchanges of Chicago and the ports of Casablanca. They are being fought with export bans and tariffs. And the winner is the country that holds the cards, or in this case, the country that holds the rock. For decades, we worried about peak oil. We should have been worrying about peak phosphorus. Oil runs the machines. Phosphorus runs the people. And as the machines get more efficient, we need less oil. But as the people keep multiplying, we need more food. The trend lines are clear. The leverage of the oil states is falling. The leverage of the food states is rising. Welcome to the new geopolitical reality. It is not fueled by gasoline. It is fueled by NPK. This is the hidden crisis of 2026. While the news talks about elections and scandals, the real story is in the soil. It is in the depletion of the earth and the monopoly of the cure. Inside, the global economy will continue to track the supply ships. We will watch the export data, because in a hungry world, the only thing that matters is who has the keys to the pantry. And right now, those keys are in Rabat. We all know who controls the oil. But nobody talks about who controls the bread. In 2026, there is only one country that stands between the world and mass starvation. And it is not the United States. It is not China. It is a kingdom in North Africa that sits on 70% of the only element that keeps humanity alive. They are the new Saudi Arabia, but they are not selling gas. They are selling survival. Inside the global economy breaks down the hidden forces shaping the world economy. When we talk about geopolitical power, we usually talk about energy. We talk about pipelines and tanker ships and the price of a barrel of crude. We assume that the ultimate leverage in the modern world is the ability to turn off the lights. But we are wrong. The ultimate leverage is the ability to turn off the food. You can walk to work if there is no gas. You can put on a sweater if there is no heating oil. But you cannot go without food. And in the modern industrial world, you cannot grow food without 3 specific chemical elements: nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Nitrogen is easy. It is in the air. We can pull it out of the sky using natural gas. Potassium is common, but phosphorus is the bottleneck. Phosphorus is the biological hard limit of life on Earth. It is in your DNA. It is in your cell membranes. It is the P in ATP, the molecule that gives your body energy. Without phosphorus, plants cannot grow, crops cannot mature, and billions of people cannot eat. Here is the terrifying part. Phosphorus cannot be synthesized. You cannot print it. You cannot grow it. You have to dig it out of the ground. And in 2026, the ground that holds it is almost entirely in one country, Morocco. This is the story of how a quiet monarchy in North Africa became the most strategically important nation on the planet. It is the story of the coming food wars. And it is the story of why your grocery bill is about to become a monthly mortgage payment. To understand the crisis we are facing in 2026, we have to look at the perfect storm that just hit the global agricultural system. For the last 50 years, we have lived in an era of cheap food. We got used to the idea that we could go to the supermarket and buy anything we wanted at any time of year for a few dollars. That era was built on cheap fertilizer. It was built on a global supply chain that moved millions of tons of white powder from mines in Russia, China, and Morocco to farms in Iowa, Brazil, and India. But that supply chain has broken. In 2025, China quietly extended its ban on phosphate exports. Beijing realized that it needed to secure its own food supply before it could feed the world. They saw the writing on the wall. They saw the rising cost of extraction and the shrinking reserves, and they decided to close the gates. China used to be the world's biggest exporter. Overnight, that supply evaporated. At the same time, the war in Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia have crippled the Russian fertilizer industry. Russia was a major supplier of all 3 key nutrients. But with their ports blocked and their banking system sanctioned, Russian fertilizer is struggling to reach the global market. That leaves the world with only one option: Morocco. According to the United States Geological Survey, Morocco holds over 70% of the world's proven phosphate reserves. Let that number sink in. 70%. OPEC controls maybe 40% of the world's oil. Morocco has nearly double that dominance in the food market. In 2026, Morocco is not just a participant in the market, it is the market. The state-owned company OCP Group has become the central bank of agriculture. They decide how much rock comes out of the ground, they decide the price, and effectively they decide who eats and who starves. This kind of monopoly power is unprecedented in human history. And to understand how dangerous it is, we have to go back to the 19th century. We have to go back to the last time the world fought a war over fertilizer. Most people don't know this, but in the 1800s, the world ran on bird poop. Before we knew how to mine phosphate rock, the only source of concentrated fertilizer was guano. The droppings of seabirds that had accumulated for thousands of years on tiny islands off the coast of Peru. This guano was white gold. It was so valuable that the United States passed a law in 1856 called the Guano Island Act. It allowed any American citizen to claim any uninhabited island in the world for the United States if it had bird poop on it. That is how desperate we were. In 1879, a war broke out between Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. It was called the War of the Pacific, but historians call it the Guano War. Thousands of men died. Ironclad battleships were sunk, cities were burned, all for the control of bird droppings. Why were they willing to die for poop? Because they knew what we have forgotten. They knew that soil depletes. Every time you harvest a crop of corn or wheat, you are sucking nutrients out of the ground. If you do not put them back, the soil dies. And if the soil dies, the civilization dies. The Guano War was a warning. It showed that when the food supply is threatened, nations will resort to extreme violence. Today, we don't fight over bird poop. We fight over phosphate rock, and the stakes are infinitely higher. In 1879, the world population was 1 billion. Today, it is 8 billion. We are entirely dependent on artificial fertilizer to keep those 8 billion people alive. Without it, scientists estimate that we could only feed about half the current population. That means 4 billion people owe their lives to the mining shovels in the Moroccan desert. This brings us to the geopolitical pivot of 2026. The United States and Europe have suddenly realized that they have a massive strategic vulnerability. For decades, they focused on energy security. They built strategic petroleum reserves. They fought wars in the Middle East to secure the oil flow. But they have no strategic fertilizer reserve. The United States has depleted its own high-quality phosphate mines in Florida. We are now a net importer. We are dependent on foreign powers to grow our own corn and soy. And the foreign power we are dependent on is using that leverage